Good day and welcome to tonight's edition of the Evening Review. I'm Ashley Smith, the news editor of Namibian Sun. Let's take a look at today's headlines. And welcome back. We've got quite an interesting interview today with Oiva Angula, a Lubango dungeon survivor and author. And he sat down with our reporter, Jemima Bucas.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jemima Bucas. I'm your host for this evening. So as we all know, there's this reconciliation motion that has completely disturbed the National Assembly. And we brought into the studio today Mr. Oiva Angula, who is a Lubango dungeon survivor and also an author. He wrote the book SWAPO Captive. So Mr. Oiva will share with us some of his experience and what he's been doing since he went into retirement. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Angula.
Thank you for having me here.
Now, Mr. Oiva, you've been in retirement for over a year now, about a year?
Yeah, that's correct.
How do you find retirement?
I think I find retirement very interesting because I have, I think, flexi time. And I'm busy compiling some stories, also from our past. Especially from Lubango.
Now, before we go to your book and the ordeals at Lubango dungeons, why do you think and why do you feel it is important that the ruling party, SWAPO, must deal with this issue?
I think it is important because history tells us that if you are emerging from a very violent past, it is important that you try to find healing of the wounds inflicted on the victims. Otherwise, these things will not die away naturally. They will always resurface, and that will be passed on to generations to come.
And why, in your view, do you think it would be fair for the next generations to be dealing with this trauma when it should have been dealt with right at this point?
Yeah, I think the National Assembly has got a constitutional obligation to foster national reconciliation. As far as I'm concerned, at the moment, there is no written policy or guidelines on national reconciliation, and that is why it is very important that we do not just talk about national reconciliation in a vacuum, but we need to take concrete steps to ensure that the nation is reconciled and all those who were wronged in the past have been heard, and there was a process where the perpetrators would acknowledge their wrongs and then express remorse and ask for forgiveness, and then that would start the process of healing for the victims, and then there will be forgiveness of the wrongs perpetrated in the past.
Now, Mr. Oiva, you're talking about wounds. Now, when you wrote your book, which was launched recently, the book is titled Swapo Captive, A Comrade's Experience of Betrayal and Torture. You spoke a great deal about the not only the physical, but psychological wounds inflicted on young Namibians in the Lubango dungeons. Please share with us some of these experiences.
Yeah, Lubango in the 1980s was not the place to be, because hundreds of young Namibians were arrested, ostensibly for being South African spies. Many of them were killed, some, and I think others were tortured and thrown into dungeons. Even kids as young as 15 were also in prison and being accused of being South African spies. And during the process, different methods of torture were used, like beatings, being tied upside down in very painful positions, being suffocated, being buried alive.
Sure.
And so the sessions of interrogation were so brutal to the extent that many people were forced to make false confessions of being South African spies.
Now, Mr. Angula, in your book, which was launched in 2018, you refer to the governor of the Zambezi region, Mr. Sampofu, as the butcher of the Lubango. Have you ever had an interaction with him since your book was launched?
Unfortunately not.
You also, in your book, you also made reference to an experience with the founding fathers, Dr. Sam Nujoma, and that you got the impression at the time that he has betrayed you during that time, during the struggle. How do you feel now?
I still feel the same, that as a leader, Nujoma did not have the courtesy to listen to us and to get our view why we were there. Instead, he chose to pour verbal abuses on us. And after he had done so, he just turned around and then left. And that encouraged these, our captors to even mistreat us, because they thought that they had the blessing of the commander-in-chief. So that is why I said that up to now I feel that he was indeed the betrayer and not us.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we conclude, Mr. Angula, you wrote a very, very moving feature in one of the daily newspapers this week, sharing the ordeal of some of your fellow hostages in the Lubango dungeons. Are you? Can you tell us whether you're working on another book?
Yes, that is my idea of working on a book, that I want to capture the experience of other survivors of the Lubango dungeons. And I hopefully would want the book to be out by next year.
How did you feel, can you please share with us how this experience was for you writing this, the first book, The Ordeal of Others, which was recently published, and now working on this next book?
I think writing the book Swapo Captive was a process of healing for myself as well. Of course, recalling the injustices done in Lubango was a bit of a torment, but I think I had to continue writing the book because the story must be told. And this is just a personal narrative, an attempt, a small attempt on my part to stamp an alternative narrative on the collective memory of our nation, so that they know the truth, because for now we have been living in a lie, as being told by the victor, which is SWAPO. And I think it is time for the people to live in the truth, so that they know the truth, what happened to their young ones in Lubango, so that these things cannot be repeated again.
Thank you very much for sharing your story with us, Mr. Oiva.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in. God bless.
And that's all we have time for this evening on the Evening Review. Please stay safe this weekend, as a cold front is about to hit us very intensely this evening. So stay safe and stay warm. I'm Ashley Smith, the news editor of Namibian Sun.